Alrighty, lads, we are here for some dwarf lore. This time, what the fuck is the Skryzen Harbok? Now, the Skryzen Harbok is the first airship that we ever see the dwarves use. In fact, it was created for a very specific reason that I find very unique. You see, dwarves were always about innovation and trying to create new ways, since, after all, their runes and their magic was starting to fade away. They weren't able to really reclaim that old legacy of master-crafted runemanship. But their innovation has been going through the roof. They've been able to design crazy inventions, like the sea gates, able to channel water and use it to power some steam. It's really amazing stuff they were inventing. So, one dwarf, known as Helgen Copperfist, decided to invent an airship. Now, I should say this first. It wasn't actually him. It was actually stated that his grandfather was part of the Engineers Guild and got banned from the Engineers Guild for trying to do a ship that could fly in the air. Because again, dwarves are very traditional. They say, "You should keep your feet on the ground. No Dowey should ever have his feet in the sky." Shit like that. So, because dwarves are very traditional, they did not believe in the airship. They believe the sky and the sea is elven territory. It's flimsy, it's not sturdy, there's nothing dwarven about the air and the sea. So, Helgen Copperfist saved a lot of those schematics from his grandfather. And his own cousins and brothers always warned him, "Hey, I know you're a damn good engineer and all that, but our family is finally recovering from the guilt, the shame that our grandfather bestowed upon us. Abandon his research. Stop what you're doing. You're only going to bring shame to us all. Quit following your grandfather's legacy." And it's actually pretty interesting is that Helgen Copperfist was noted to be a very, very good craftsman. And that's why he was so tolerated in the Engineers Guild. Like, he could make a barrel like no other. It'd be flawless, perfect. You could whack this thing with an axe and the barrel would not break. So Helgen Copperfist was a good engineer by all accounts. Problem is that he's around a lot of traditional thinking dwarves, and it's very hard to convince someone who's 300 years old that something is a possibility that he's never considered. It's actually an engineer guild saying, which is that new inventions creates new problems. So this is why the engineers guild is very scrutinizing of certain technologies like this. Because anytime there's something that's new invented, that means that they have to study the shit out of it and make sure that all the flaws are worked out. All the kinks are worked out. And it's kind of a whole craftsmanship thing. Dwarves take a lot of pride in their craft. So if they have a weapon that hurts the user, they consider it a useless weapon. Despite the fact it could vaporize a god, it doesn't matter because it hurts the user. So this is one of those situations where the dwarves are looking at this airship and they see it being as flimsy as it is and they consider it too risky. But thankfully, during the War of the Beard, also known as the War of Vengeance, the Skryzen Harbok actually gets approved and it actually gets built. And this is where we're going to talk about it. It's fucking awesome. So the Skryzen Harbok, what was it really designed for? So first off, it was designed as a blimp to sail through the air. We know that much. But what was it really designed for? Why was it approved during the War of Vengeance? It was designed and built for the sole purpose of killing dragons. That is it. So what it would do in order to kill dragons is it had 6 ballistas, 3 on each side. And these ballistas were actually new. What made these ballistas so unique was that they were made from Karak Kadrin by another engineer. And these ballistas were on axles. So by being on an axle, a single dwarf can lift it and pivot it and aim it up, down, however he needs it. The problem is with this thing is that the ballistas can't aim exactly up and they can't aim exactly down. They can aim at a certain incline, yes, but they can't aim straight up or straight down because they're going to hit the blimp. Now, what's interesting about these blimps, we're going to talk about its design, is that these blimps were made with runes scratched into the holes. Now, these runes are runes of protection. They make it where a dragon's claws and teeth could not hurt the hull of the ship. The Skryzen Harbok was pretty immune to that damage. So that leaves one other weakness. What about the airbag? The airbag that's full of helium, a very flammable substance. Well, they had a thick oil coating around the blimp itself. And this thick oil coating was more or less resistant to fire. It was actually really cool is that a dragon breathed flames on one of the blimps, and the flames almost bounced off the blimp because of this thick oil coating. Now, I theorize that had the dragon been a little bit more persistent, he probably would have eroded the goddamn oil coating, but he decided just one was good, and he's like, wow, that did not work. Now, you may have noticed something that's very interesting here is that the airbag of the blimp is protected against fire, but it's not protected against damage. So if someone shot a ballista into it or a dragon sinked its claws into the airbag, it would rupture. Whereas the hull of the ship was protected against teeth and ballistas and whatever have you, but it wasn't protected against fire. So you had this interesting, delicate balance where one part of the ship is immune to one thing, but the other part of the ship is not immune to that. Now, the issue we have with the War of the Beard is that a ballista, even a well-shot ballista, couldn't hurt a dragon too much. It would dent their scales and leave openings in their armor for sure, but the amount of ballista fire you would need to bring down a dragon was a little bit too much, especially star dragons and sun dragons and moon dragons. Like they're very tough dragons. They're very different than the dragons that exist around the world. So, in order to get around this, they equipped something called Thunzar, and Thunzar is also known as Foul Stone. Now, the dwarves didn't really know what it was at the time. They were very desperate just to get their hands on any weapon that could hurt the elves and destroy their dragons. After all, one dragon killed like 60,000 dwarves. These dragons are very, very dangerous. So, Thunzar is this powder-like substance that is extremely flammable upon impact with any sort of material. It burns anything, and it goes through anything. Now, the issue with Thunzar is that it cannot be put out like a normal fire. It is a very magical substance. It has a green flame, hint, hint. Now, the interesting thing about Thunzar is that it was able to disintegrate an entire dragon's wing. I'm not joking. One ballista hit a dragon's wing very, very narrowly, and the Thunzar erupted into flames and the dragon fell to the ground with his entire wing nothing but bone. That is how deadly Thunzar is. Now, Thunzar is extremely flammable. Helium is extremely flammable, and they're both on the same ship. This is where things get a little rough. So when the Skryzen Harbok were made, there were 6 of them. Well, you know the names of 2 of them. One was called King Snorri. King Snorri was the flagship kind of thing, but it was bigger than the others. And what made King Snorri so interesting was that it was like a rallying call to all the dwarves. After all, if you remember, I did a lore video called Prince Snorri Halfhand. Snorri Halfhand was a hero amongst the dwarven people, a very brash person, and he was a prince. But unfortunately, he died. So as like a rallying call to all the dwarves, it was called King Snorri, the ship. And of course, a lot of dwarves really like puffed out their beards, thumping their chests like, yeah, King Snorri's revenge time, baby. Now, the other ship is called Nadri's Revenge. Nadri was the relative of Helgen Copperfist, who kept warning him not to build these damn airships. And unfortunately, Nadri got killed by a bunch of dark elves, which made Helgen Copperfist more adamant to aid the war effort against the elves by creating these, the Skryzen Harboks, a way to cripple the elves as revenge, as well as the ship's name, Nadri's Retribution. Retribution for what has happened. So the goal was that these 6 ships would be tested in the field of battle against dragons. So what they would do is they sent the 6 blimps out, and the 6 blimps went to the Khazads. Now, Khazads, as I have talked about before, the Khazads are known as fortresses. They're not holds. The reason why is because Scaranaui live in them. Scaranaui is hill dwarves, dwarves who don't live in the mountain. Now, the Khazads, during this entire 25 years of warfare, were never attacked, but they did supply trade and goods to the dwarves of the holds. And up to now, the elves never bothered the Khazads. The reason why was because, again, they weren't attacking them. So, the elves didn't attack in kind. But this time, the elves were like, okay, we need to cut off the supply of the dwarf holds. And these Khazads are providing a lot of goods. So the dwarves anticipated that the dragons would be around this area. And sure enough, the dragons were. They were attacking one of the 3 great Khazads. So the dwarven airships come into the rescue, and lo and behold, they actually took down a dragon. And upon doing so, 6 more dragons appeared, and it became a firefight like none other. What's interesting here is that the Scries and Harbocks were pretty damn good. They were actually able to hold their ground, they were ambushed by dragons, but yet they were still able to repel this ambush. They were still able to take down a dragon. And taking down one dragon is a huge victory in of itself. But here's where we come to the bad side. Here's the reason why Scries and Harbocks are never seen ever again. King Snorri, the ship, had a bag rupture. A dragon came in with its mouth and chomped into the bag, and the ship was slowly sinking. As the ship was slowly sinking to the ground, to where the Khazad was, this entire town, this entire city, there was a demon on board who is undercover. His name was Drogar. Drogar was a demon of Tzeentch. But Drogar, with the Thunzar, the other flammable substance mixed with the helium, he used his foul magic on top of it to ignite it. And by igniting all 3 of these substances, the ship, King Snorri, which was the biggest one, erupted in a nuclear blast. And to this day, the engineers still don't know why the hell it did that. They don't know how. They couldn't recreate that explosion. But the nuclear blast totally destroyed Khazad Mingol. Khazad Mingol was utterly devastated and destroyed. And yes, 2 dragons were dead, but losing 3 of the airships and then losing an entire city, the dwarves of the Engineers Guild were very, very pissed, to say the least. And Helgen Copperfist quickly dismantled the last 3 ships and tried to study the hardest he could on what exactly Thunzar is and why did it cause such a nuclear explosion. Because every time he mixed helium with Thunzar, it made an explosion, yeah, but not nearly as grand or as humongous as this explosion was. And as he was studying Thunzar and its properties, he realized this. Thunzar is foulstone, just grounded up into a powder. And Thunzar, being foulstone, means that it's warpstone. And upon discovering this, Drogar, the demon, manifests out of the shadows into Helgen's workshop. And Helgen goes, "What? You're dead." And that's when he realizes that Drogar was never dead. Drogar was simply a demon who was role-playing as a dwarf, and no one realized it. What was so cool about this exchange is that Helgen is absolutely terrified out of his mind. And as he's seeing the demon pick up a bunch of Thunzar and pick up some helium, the demon's hands light up on fire, and he goes, "Don't worry, I've done this before." And he sticks his fiery hand inside the flammable substances and blows up Helgen's workshop. In doing so, the Engineers Guild banned the blimps. They banned it. 100%, just they weren't going to do it ever again. And King Brynjolf of Barak-Var, who sponsored the invention of Scries and Harbok, he was forever pissed. He was like, shit, now the Engineers Guild is going to scrutinize me. Now I lose my claim about the High King of Karazhan Kor. All my deeds now are going to be masked by this huge shame that I brought to myself by allowing this invention to be created. Because after all, he did just destroy an entire Khazad, and he allowed the invention of a device that wasn't properly studied and resulted in many, many dwarves dying. This is indeed a great shame for a king. Now, Helgen Copperfist, he wasn't really talked about much at all. Like, after this whole event, he kind of just fades away into history. But it's probably because he's got no more descendants. He didn't have a wife. Nadri, his relative, didn't have a wife. So there's really no lineage here. So as far as Helgen Copperfist goes, his story ends there. And with that, so does the Skryzen Harbach. Besides that, see you guys next time. I hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys next time. And as always, don't forget to vote. I'm going to be doing a voting poll here shortly, so that way you guys can vote on what next to look at. See you guys next time.